Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar. It looks like we still have a couple minutes until we hit that hour mark. So go ahead and just make sure that you are comfortable and ready to learn here. And we'll be back just in a couple minutes to get things kicked off. Thank you. All right, everyone. Welcome again to the webinar. If you didn't hear me a couple minutes ago, just wanted to, again, say hi to everyone. And it looks like we have a pretty good attendee list here, so I'm really excited to get this thing actually kicked off today. This is one of our newer webinars, so I'm very curious to hear some feedback on it or just what additional questions that you all may have in regards to the webinar. So with that being said, let's go ahead and actually get this thing kicked off. Right now, my expectation is you should be able to see my screen. So just keep in mind that the GoToWebinar software that we use does have an area to ask questions. So if you have any concerns, like if the audio is bad or you can't see the screen as expected, feel free to go ahead and just post a question and I'll try to keep an eye on those to the best of my ability. Or again, too, if you just have any questions about the functionality of the product or anything that I'm saying as we go, put those in as well, and hopefully we can all learn from those questions as we go. So with that being said, let me go ahead and full screen this and we will get this kicked off. All right, so for anybody who doesn't know what training they're in, this one today is about objectives, and more specifically, it is about advanced objective concepts. So again, very excited for this. It'll really get into the next level and help you hopefully understand what some of those next level projects are that you can complete. With that being said, my name is Clay Creighton. I am a product manager here at Encompass, and I'm the product manager for the CRM portion of the software. So what does that actually mean? Well, CRM just stands for Customer Relationship Management, but the product here at Encompass really has quite a few features. Some of the popular ones that you may recognize are Encompass Mobile, both from the sales, delivery, and merchandising side. But we also handle a lot of the objectives, surveys and task workflows as well. And the two pair together go ahead and formulate a great CRM and sales execution solution for you all to use out in the marketplace. So again, very, very excited to present this stuff, and let's go over the overview today. So a little bit about the overview. What we're going to do first off is we're going to do a recap of the Surveys 101 training. Now, the reason I feel like this is important is because really this training is a 200 level training. So if you do not recognize some of the concepts in this training, that is A-okay. Just know that we do have a very basic Surveys 101 webinar that we actually released a couple weeks ago. And if you want to watch that one first or follow up with that one, feel free. That should be recorded and available within our knowledge resource that is available to you all. So feel free to check that out again if you have not checked that out before. Now, once we understand what was recapped last time, we're going to ask some questions about what are objectives truly within Encompass, right? And how do those relate to you all as a business? Then once we understand that, a large majority of the training is really going to be focused on how to go ahead and manipulate the outputs of these objectives so that your sales reps and your sales force, your employees who are out in the marketplace are able to efficiently consume these tasks, and ultimately you're able to get the results and the data that you want out of them, right? So within that, we're going to talk about the difference between objective schedules, we're going to use activities and assignments and how those interact with objectives, and then we're going to also talk about mobile items. So wide variety of topics, and it should fill up the majority of the time that we have together today. All right, let me check to see if we have any questions. First off, make sure audio is good to go. There are no questions, so I'm going to take that as a good sign. So that being said, let's get into the recap of whatever we covered last time. So the presenter last time was Steven. Steven is actually a very talented analyst and expert on my team here at Encompass. And really what he wanted to emphasize is how objectives relate to surveys. And a big portion of that is just because surveys are definitely our #1 use case of objectives because they're rather simple to set up, and many distributors out there, right, require the collection of this information to either get that info to their suppliers or, again, take actionable business steps based on that data. So when Steven went through the survey creation process, he really started off with how do you add an objective, right? Now, once that objective was added, he did walk you through how to ask different types of questions, right? So when we think about like a display survey, he went through, how would you add a question for how many cases is the display? How can you make sure that the user takes an image of that display once they're done? So on and so forth. And then once the questions are all wrapped up, right, the focus typically is then on the statuses themselves. So we know that we have an objective and we have questions which transformed that objective into a survey now. But what happens when those answers are completed? Is it merely that we just record that data and we want to report on that data? Or is it something like a vehicle inspection where once the surveys are actually answered, there's some sort of actionable item on it? So to give you a good, more elaborated example on that, for vehicle inspections, right, the hopes is the user is actually walking the truck, and within that vehicle inspection, they're saying, yes, my truck is in good working condition, or no, it is not. Now, if it's not in good working condition, the hopes is they don't just take that truck out onto the road, right? Someone is doing something actionable with it. And we can really use statuses to guide that workflow. So they say, yep, my vehicle has substantial issues, and then that task is actually then routed off to the DOT manager. And then once the DOT manager is complete with it, the actual fix, then it can go back to the driver for confirmation, so on and so forth, right? So statuses are an important part about integrating workflows into these surveys themselves. And then he talked about schedules. So schedules are important whenever you create surveys that really need to be on a reoccurring basis, and also are super useful if you go ahead and want the survey to be prompted. So think about like a tap handle survey, right? Tap handle surveys, you may require your reps out in the field to take those things once a quarter. So adding in a schedule to the objective really takes the legwork off of your staff to remember to generate those tasks manually, and have the system do that work for you to generate those tasks, so that every quarter you're getting that information that you need. And then the last part that he mentioned was all about adding products and brands, as well as locations and roles to the objective. So once you have the objective out there with questions, you know the workflow of the objective, and then you add the schedule to it. Well, you really need to ask yourself, who is this objective actually meant for, right? And if it's something like a display survey or a tap handle survey, maybe you only want it to be focused on a subset of your overall products or your overall brands. So you can actually narrow down that scope to those specific brands or products. Alternatively, right, we know that all surveys are not meant for all users. So you may have something, again, referring back to the tap handle survey, that is really sales rep focused or sales management focused, and it doesn't make sense for people like merchandisers or delivery reps to be viewing that information. So you can set roles on the objectives as well, or locations, and again, making sure that only the specific users are seeing those objectives that you want to. So there's a lot of great content within that. If any of those topics interest you and you want to know more about them, or you want to see some examples, that's again where I would suggest that you go back to that existing webinar and check that out. I think it's super helpful. All right, so with that being said, right, we have a bunch of other stuff to talk about, assuming that we already know those workflows. So where I like to start us off on the more advanced concepts is a very simplistic question, which is funny. But what I tell people to think about is, what is an objective and Encompass? And what I've posted on this slide here is just, a quick little definition of what an objective is from Google, right? And the result that we got is a thing aimed at or sought, a goal, right? And that's exactly what I tell people objectives are in Encompass. It's something for someone to do, right? It's an actionable item. Now, those actionable items may come in many different forms, and one of those forms is surveys. And that's, again, what Stephen covered last time. But what we're going to do is we're going to branch out of that into some of the other objectives that we can have people do in the field, and what it looks like to set those up. So to give you some sort of visual here, I gave us a little diagram, right? I want to check our questions real quick first before we go over this. Still no questions. Okay. So from the diagram, this is used to outline what the objective structure is and what the outputs of objectives are. So let's start at the top of the tree. The first thing that we see is objectives, right? So again, these are actionable items. Now, the output of objectives are tasks. Okay, and pretty simple terms to understand, right? You may have an objective to do, and as a company, that objective needs to be completed by multiple people. So each individual instance of that objective would be a task. Right? So the objective is really the engine or the folder to get those tasks complete. Now, once the task has been generated, the form of a task can be many different things. So one form of the task that we've already talked about is a survey, right? So we're not going to dwell on that too much. But another form of a task that can be created is an action item. So a great example for this would be a sales rep is within an account, right? And they see maybe we have some dunnage sitting out on the back of the store, right? So we're at a Walmart, we have a couple pallets out back, and what they want to do is make sure that the driver remembers to pick those up next time. So what they can do is they can add a task. Now the category of that task would be a work order objective, and from that, right, that objective knows that this is purely just an action item. So when we send that task to that driver, right, they know that this is an action item based on how the objective was set up, and they can say, yes, I did go ahead and pick up the pallets. They can either simply complete those tasks, or alternatively, right, they can send a message back to the sales rep letting them know, hey, I did go ahead and pick up these pallets. You don't need to worry about it, and then mark it complete as well. So there's a lot of flexibility within those action items that they can do. Now, something more advanced that we're going to continue to get in is tasks can also create portals to dashboards. So if you click on a task, right, it doesn't have to be your typical, here's your text, here's your status. It can actually navigate you to dashboards that you have already designed on the server side. So if you wanted, your sales reps to make sure that they're viewing your sales goals dashboard each time before they go into a invoice, well, you can create a task for that. And not only can you create a task for that, but you can actually see if they're completing those tasks as well. So they view the dashboard, they're like, okay, I know where I'm standing within my current sales goals, or I know if this customer is trending up or trending down, and then they have that contextual information before actually going into the invoice themselves, right? And that's just one example of a dashboard. Dashboards can be formatted to really whatever you want. And later in the presentation, we're actually going to make our own dashboard and demonstrate this. So very excited for that. And then reports, right? So if you just need them to view a simple report, not a whole dashboard, that's an option as well. And also tasks can direct users to other apps. So this is a very interesting idea, but I think here at Encompass, we recognize that Encompass Mobile is definitely not the only app that those users are using out in the field. A lot of times the suppliers are either highly suggesting or mandating certain applications to be used out in the field. So we want to make sure that we're there for you within that process from the supplier, and that we make that transition as easy as possible from Encompass Mobile to those other apps. And then once they're done with those other apps, right, they can go ahead and easily transition back from that app to Encompass and resume their day without any hiccups. So great stuff there as well. All right, so how are some of the ways that tasks are actually created? So we know that the forms of tasks can come in many different flavors, many different varieties, right? But how do these tasks actually get scheduled to get to the reps out in the field? Well, before I get into the bullet points, the basics are they can either add those tasks by themselves. For example, work orders, right? It would be very simple for someone to just add a task on the fly and say, pick up the pallets at the back of this Walmart. Or they can go ahead and easily add tasks from just taking surveys whenever they want. So there is a take new survey option within Encompass Mobile. They're always welcome to go ahead and tap in that section and take whatever surveys that you put out there for them. But sometimes ad hoc actions like that don't make sense, right? You're wanting to schedule these things out ahead of time and make sure that those sales reps know exactly what is expected of them that day. And one way to do that is to make sure that those things are popping up or are in their interface automatically. So objective schedules are fantastic for making sure that surveys are prompted. So if you want a user to go into an account and get prompted for a display survey or a tap handle survey, objective schedules are typically the best way to handle that, right? They're on a reoccurring basis. When you want them to be scheduled, and they're upfront in that user's phase when they go into those accounts. Now, alternatively, we also have two other ways to schedule tasks, and that is in regards to activities and assignments. So if you're not familiar with these words, that is no worries. We'll get into them in quite a bit, but basically what activities are route-based tasks, okay? So for example, if you wanted your sales reps again to view a dashboard task every single time they went into an account, activities would be the perfect way to set that up, because you can say, for all of my pre-sale routes, I want them to do this task, right? For all of my delivery routes, I want them to do this task, okay? Now, assignments is a very similar concept, except it has nothing to do with retailers, okay? So the most popular example of this is vehicle inspections. So you want to make sure that people are getting their vehicle inspection tasks and surveys every day. But we all know that vehicle inspections really don't have anything to do with the retailers, right? So what you can do is, using the assignment structure, you can actually populate pre and post trip tasks directly in Encompass Mobile, so that as the user enters their day, they know not only do I have to go out there and hit the road and deliver this product, but they also know that, hey, before I do hit the road or when I come back, here's the actions that I need to do. Now, again, pre and post trips, the most popular example is vehicle inspections, but we've also seen a lot of success with things like expense surveys. So if your sales reps have credit cards and they're out there swiping them to get gas or do other company expenses, right, you can put a survey at the end of their day to record those expenses, and then you can run reports on those things. You can also use assignments to do things like schedule meetings, schedule breaks, schedule meals, so on and so forth, so that, again, you can keep track of users doing those things and how long they're doing those things for. All right, so lots of hypotheticals right now and lots of graphs, but I really wanted to go ahead and point out from the Encompass Mobile interface where this stuff shows up, and hopefully that will start to tie some of these concepts together. So what we're seeing on the left-hand side screenshot here is a sales stop, okay? So right now, the user has clicked into the stop, Boley's Grubhub, and what they're recognizing when they go into this account is they have one thing that they need to do that is required of their route, and that is the sales invoice. So what I want to do is tie this back to our sales goals dashboard that we were talking about earlier. So what you can do using activities objectives is you can actually add additional functions into this page here. So instead of just seeing one bubble at the top, they would have two bubbles, right? They would have the first one that would say sales goals, right? Or check sales goals. They would click into that. And then when they hit back, they can complete that task. And then the next thing that they would have to do is a sales invoice. And then, of course, they would complete the invoice and then mark that as complete as well. So you can go ahead and really focus based on the requirements of that route and your distributor, what things you want them to accomplish while they're in that stop. Now, sometimes too, users, when they go into stops, they may see a little line break here that says other tasks, and then it may list out some of those other tasks. With that being said, these would be where you would see things like display surveys or tap handles or whatever, because those tasks are not tied directly to the route. They are tasks basically floating out there that we know need to be accomplished, but they're not something that you have to do every single time that you go into a pre-sale stop or that you do when you go into a delivery stop. So they'll pop up here, which gives the user visibility into those tasks, but again, it has a little different scheduling behind it. That being said, it is, again, very popular for people to also prompt these types of tasks as well. So the action to the user, if they click into this event, is they may be prompted immediately for that task. They would take that survey, and then once they're done with that survey, this would already be marked as complete, and they would go ahead and just proceed forward with their activities objectives. Okay, so that was pretty lengthy explanation. So still no questions, but again, if you all are confused about any of those terms, definitely go ahead and put those questions into the GoToWebinar, and I'd be happy to answer those. All right, so with that being said, another concept that we talked about was assignment objectives, right? So these are going to be our pre and post trips, our meals, our breaks, so on and so forth. So this example here would be what a pre-trip would look like. So in Encompass Mobile, you pull up your day, and the first event that you have to do is a pre-trip event, right? Now, if the only thing that you want them to do in the pre-trip event is the vehicle inspection, well, voila, that task is available there for them to take, right? But again, if you're wanting them to do multiple different tasks before they head out the door, feel free to script those as well, right? Or maybe we want to keep the mornings as light as possible so that they can get out the door, and then we want to add things into their end of day when they come back, well, we can do that as well, right? So you really do have the flexibility to guide these users to the information that you want them to collect within pre-trips, post-trips, as well as any of those activity objectives as well. So lots of different options there. But what I want to do next is I really want to take it up a notch, okay? So one of the things that I mentioned, and I will probably continue to mention until we get to the live demo, is that sales dashboard for viewing goals, right? So when I bring this up, a lot of times people will have a hard time making the association from how do I jump from Encompass Mobile, display a task, and then view that dashboard. Well, the answer to that is a structure that we call mobile items, okay? Now, before we get into the mobile items table itself, really what I just want you to understand for right now is a mobile item is literally just a custom button within Encompass Mobile, okay? Now, these custom buttons can be set up to display dashboards. They can be set up to display reports, apps, websites, other Encompass Mobile tools, or even different data or different surveys. Now, the reason I bring them up in the context of this webinar and this conversation is because not all of these pages you want users to see all of the time. So what we can do is we can combine this concept of a custom button, which we call a mobile item, with an objective, and the objective's purpose is to make tasks. And what the result is we will have objectives that will generate tasks, and then when the user clicks on that task, they will be directed to whatever this mobile item is pointing them to. So that could be, again, our sales goals dashboard. So a couple layers deep here, but it allows you all to be very flexible to what pages those users see when they are clicking on those apps. Now, this is basically back to an original diagram that I showed you, but I just added these two mobile items on the side, right? So we've already established that an objective makes a task, and then a task comes in many different flavors and forms, right? But when I click on these tasks, well, how the heck does it know to go to dashboard 1, 2, 3, right, versus just showing a survey? Well, the reason for that is because whenever we set up the objective itself, we have the option to also identify a mobile item. So if we do have a mobile item linked to that objective, well, whenever I create a task, right, now that task, we know that it needs to show a dashboard, but exactly what that dashboard is defined by that mobile item. So all of these concepts really tie to each other to get the user to the right place. All right, enough diagrams, right? Enough slides. Let's go ahead and check out some live examples here. All right, going into questions, still no questions, fantastic. All right, so right now I'm jumping into one of our test sites. It's just one of our Pioneer test sites. So if the data is not resemblant of yours, that's okay, right? But hopefully it will get those concepts across. So what I wanted us to do first is focus back on the concept of activities and assignments, okay, and how those tie into objectives from a table standpoint. So what I typically like to do when I'm explaining this is go to the routes table. Even if you don't work with routes, you should be familiar with the table, right? The responsibility of the table is to determine what our routes are for our sales reps, our drivers, or our merchandisers, or driver sale, whatever, right? And there's a lot going on this table, but the two fields that we're going to be talking about today is activities and assignment groups. So what I can do here first is I'm just going to filter our list down to delivery. And from delivery, I also want to make sure that we're only looking at our weekly routes. All right, perfect. So what I see here is we have a 301 Friday route here. Now on this route, we have an activity of delivery, okay? Now this is really used to define what type of route it is, but let's go into that further, right? So the delivery activity is really responsible for two main purposes. One is making sure that we understand the type of route it is, right? And as well as it holds some of the different routing methods that we have within Encompass as well. We're not really concerned about within this training the routing methods, but we are more concerned about how do we define what the route truly is and what the responsibilities are when you run one of these routes. And based on the activity, what we can do is we can hit subtables and we can show activities objectives. So what this is basically saying is anytime that I run a route that is tied to a delivery activity, well, that delivery activity has a series of objectives for me to do, okay? So what we'll do in a little bit is we'll actually add to this list, right? We don't want the user to just accomplish the invoice. Maybe we want them to do something else. And this is where you would map that out so that you can add additional objectives into those delivery routes, okay? Now, another thing too, right, is you notice that we did have a assignment group on these as well. So what the assignment groups are used for is our non-customer events. So basically this is saying anytime that we run a 301 Friday Gehring route, not only do we want them to be responsible for doing these things in their delivery stops, but we also want them to be doing these assignments. So by clicking on the assignment groups, this table structure goes a little bit deeper, okay? So from the assignment group, I can click subtables and assignments. And assignments defines, okay, what other things do you want them to do? And what we can see here is we want them to do a pre-trip activity, or I'm sorry, that's the wrong word to use, a pre-trip assignment and as well as a post-trip assignment. But when we are doing a pre and post trip, what are we really responsible for doing in those pre and post trip assignments? Well, you look at those assignments and you do assignment objectives. And this lets you know what they need to do in those pre or post trip. So we can see here that we need to do a Encompass DOT survey in both our pre and post trip assignments, okay? So that's how we relate objectives to both assignments and activities. It traces up from the objective to the assignment group, to the route, or in the activity example, it would be to the objective, to the activities objectives, to the activity, to the route. And if you ever get confused on that, I don't blame you because it is a lot of different tables. But again, the benefit is it gives you tons of flexibility. So if you are ever wondering what that data structure is again, always just start off on the routes table, click on those activities, and then you can go ahead and just work your way down the list from there, okay? Also too, give us a call if you're interested in doing this stuff and you just need some clarification. We'll be happy to help you out as well, okay? All right, so what do we want to get into next? Okay, so what we want to do next is I really want to show you a live example of how you can set these concepts to tie together right in front of you. So what we're going to do here is, I've been mentioning that sales goal example quite a bit. And so that's what we're going to try to do. At the end of this, the result should be anytime that we generate a pre-sale route, we should not only tell the user to create an invoice, but we want them to check their sales invoice dashboard first, or their sales goals dashboard first. And so what is the steps of actually doing this? Well, we need to think about what are the precursors. One thing we know is if we want them to view a dashboard, there should probably be information on that dashboard. So what we're going to do is we're going to start off by just going ahead and creating a new comparison report. Okay. So within that comparison report, we're going to go ahead and just do a very basic example so that you can understand how these concepts tie to each other. So we're going to say, we're going to display product name in num, product num and name. We're going to display cases, and we're going to show the top 10 for this for the company here, top 10 products. And we want this to be focused on this year, and we're going to go ahead and simply just create this report. Okay, so again, very simple report, just giving us our top 10 products. Okay, now from here, I'm going to go ahead and save this report in my name. Okay, save that away. Now, what we want to do next is, once we get all of our reports together, right, we need to now add a new dashboard. So to add a new dashboard, you just hit the bottom left, new dashboard, and we can go ahead and give it a name. So we'll say sales goals dashboard, or let's call it sales metrics dashboard. How about that? Because it could include metrics or overall goals, whatever, right? And give it a name. That's all we need to do from here. We'll hit add record. Just kidding. Need to give it a dashboard category. Give it home, and then we'll add record. Okay. So now it takes us into our dashboard edit page, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and add that report. But before I do so, I'm just going to use our classic view. Okay. And exit out of this, add report. All right, here's my top 10 report example. All right, here's our dashboard, and save changes. All right, so all we've done up to this point, right, is we've made a report. We put that report onto a dashboard, and theoretically, right, you could add a couple different reports on here, or graphs, whatever you need to. And on this dashboard, we now have a URL. Okay, we know to get to this dashboard, right, you'd have to type in this URL. So what we're going to do is we're going to copy this URL for later use, is because we need to create a button that is going to be available on Encompass Mobile for us to click on and view that dashboard. So to create a mobile item, I need to go to the mobile items table. I would add the mobile item. Then from here, I'm going to go ahead and name the button the exact same thing as I named my dashboard. So that is sales metric dashboard. Okay. From here, I can choose to embed or not. Embedding simply just means, do you want the user to be booted out to a browser when they view this dashboard, or do you still want them to feel like they're within Encompass Mobile? I still want them to feel like they're in Encompass Mobile so that they don't know any different. And then the mobile application that we want it to go into is Encompass Mobile. And then you did notice that I copied that URL later. The reason I did that is because the button's going to say, okay, what do you want them to be directed to? Well, we want them to be directed to that dashboard. Now, one little trick to know about is anytime that you paste in a URL when you're creating these mobile items is there's part of the URL here called /EC and then whatever subset version of code that you The reason you want to delete this out is because today you may be on code version A, but if someone changes that to code version B, that will basically break the link here. Okay, so by removing this completely, you can ensure that you can stay on whatever version you want, and then the link will consistently be available. Okay. All right, so we've went ahead and given it a URL, and then everyone's favorite thing, right? Icons. We can go ahead and give that dashboard an icon. I like our little trophy here because we may have some goals on that dashboard, and then we can add that record. Okay, so just to make sure everyone's following along, all we've done thus far is created a report. We've thrown that report onto a dashboard. We've copied the URL from that dashboard, and we've used that to create a button that should be available within Encompass Mobile. Okay. Now we have two options. We can either go ahead and just put this button on Encompass Mobile as a static button, and you could potentially just like throw it onto the home screen, right? But if you're wanting people to interact with this button as they go through and do their day, well, that's where we have to start then tying the mobile item to the objectives, because the objectives will ensure that we create tasks for every single stop that you want them to view this dashboard. So to do that, now we need to go to the objectives table. And from the objectives, we're going to go ahead and add an objective. Again, we're going to use the exact same naming schema as both our dashboard as well as our button. So we're going to say this is objective for our sales metric dashboard. And the only thing that we need to fill out here is our mobile item. And the beauty of this is we already have our mobile item. So we can go ahead and just say sales metric dashboard and save changes. Now you notice when I added that objective, I didn't put any questions. I didn't touch anything. And the reason for that is because our objective is really just acting as a shell for us, right? It's acting as here's what you need to do when you click on this objective, and so that we can report on those things, okay? Now, that being said, if we wanted every single pre-sale user to make sure that they're doing this before their sales invoice, we need to go back to our routes and think about this structure here, okay? So what we want to do is we want to filter on our pre-sale routes. And we notice in the system right now that we have multiple pre-sale activities, and that's based on the routing logic that we talked about earlier. So what I'm noticing here is we're going to have to add this objective into multiple activities so that our users can continue to create invoices and have those routed to the correct delivery date, but also make sure that they're viewing this new dashboard. So the easiest way to do that is just click on one of these activities and click on the activities link so that you can view all of the activities. And I'm just going to narrow down our result to the pre-sale activities. So from here, right, if you remember, the ways to define what a user is responsible for doing within these activities is by simply just hitting the subtables button and activities objectives. Now from there, we can hit the plus button on all of these, and we can see our only responsibility for all of these activities is simply just to do the sales invoice, right? And I'm seeing that there. So if we want them to view their dashboard first, let's get to work, right? So what we have to do is just say, okay, for this one, I want them to view their sales metric dashboard. Okay. Bear with me, I'm just going to go ahead and add it for all of them. All right, voila. So no matter whether you're pre-selling 0 days or 5 days in advance, we know that you need to also view your sales metrics dashboard. Now, that being said, you may have noticed as I added these, both of the sequences are 0. So if we want to make sure that they're viewing the metric before the invoice, well, we can go ahead and just go straight to the activities objectives table. And we can just do a little filter on the sales invoice. We're going to change these all to 1. Fill down, save changes. Then if I go back here and just do a quick refresh, right, now we can see anytime that they go into one of these pre-sale activities, the sales metric dashboard is going to be at sequence 0, meaning that's the first thing they'd view. And then the sales invoice would be the second thing that they would do, okay? So these activities we know are tied to our routes, and routes are responsible for generating plans. And so if we generate a new plan, then we should be able to see those tasks actually being generated. So let's see if we can get that done in this demo. All right, let's just find a good pre-sale route for today. Today is Thursday. Okay, we're going to go ahead and pick on this route here for Robbie. All right, so I know that we want to generate a plan for Robbie. Let's see if there's any plans already generated for today. Today's date is November 5th. Okay, what we'll do is we'll get a route generated for Robbie today. Going into Plan Optimizer, if I can type. And we're going to say Generate Plans. And this is a Sterling route, I believe. Yes, it was. And from here, we want to identify the route. So the route was pre-sale 1100 Thursday. Okay. And we're going to go ahead and show. And then we're going to hit generate. All right. Now here's our plan. Okay. So the plan has been generated for Robbie. And if I go ahead and click on one of these events, look, we have 2 tasks. Fantastic. Now double checking our sequence to make sure that that is right. That is in fact right. So there you go. Quite a few steps. I totally understand that. But again, now anytime that sales reps go ahead and get plans generated, they will be guided to now look at that dashboard. So the examples that we used within this demonstration are very simple, right? You know, we just threw one dashboard or one report onto one dashboard and tied that together. But, you know, I just want to encourage you to continue to think about all the tools that we have available. So not only do we have basic comparison sales reports, we also have Fusion reports that you can design however you like. You can also write in your own code into dashboards as well to make that interface look however you like. And then once you have those reports and those dashboards actually built, then you can go ahead and just tie those things directly into Encompass. And you know, you can tie those onto the home page as a stagnant button, or you can use what we went over today with generating those things as individual tasks within their day so that they can go ahead and click into a new instance of that on every single stop. So let's check our questions one more time. Yeah, so got some great feedback from Tyler here. Tyler did mention that when we were creating the mobile items that the icons sometimes only showed the top 40, and I totally understand that feedback. We are continuing to think about that and continue to think of ways to improve that. We do, in fact, in the newer versions have a load more function to allow you to see those, but you're right, once they are saved as that link so that we can display those properly on Encompass Mobile. So anyways, Tyler, thanks for that feedback. We appreciate that. But with that being said, I think that was the only question that we have. So what I would say is take these concepts and really think about how they could apply to your business and what you're trying to have users truly see when they're out in the field. and then ask us, or take a stab at it yourself on creating those things, and then, linking them to Encompass Mobile is just a couple clicks away. So don't worry if you forget any of these things. This webinar was recorded, and we will be posting it to Knowledge, so feel free to always reference it back to it if you need any memory of what we demonstrated within the training today. So with that being said, that is about all I had to go over today. So I appreciate you all joining us. It means a lot. Hope you learned something. And based on that, I'm going to go ahead and get things wrapped up. One last question from Chris here was, he said, when will this post to Knowledge? Great question, Chris. What I'll do directly after this training is I will convert the GoToWebinar to a video, and that normally takes around a couple hours, and then I'll try to get posted sometime this afternoon. But what I would say is by tomorrow, it should be up and ready for you to view. So if you have any problems viewing that once it is posted, let us know and we will help you out. So again, one final thank you to everyone. I hope you have a great day and a great weekend as we roll past Friday. And if you have any questions, reach out and we'll be happy to help you. Thank you all. Bye-bye.